One thing clearly emerges from the consistory of January 7th 8. The liturgy was not at the center of the debate, not for lack of time nor distraction, but because of a choice that appears increasingly structural. This is not confirmed by rumors or controversial reconstructions, but rather by the public statements of two cardinals who, within a few days, have outlined a convergent line. A line that, albeit with different tones, seems to reduce the liturgical question to a secondary, if not even outdated theme. The first significant intervention came on January 13th, when Cardinal Czerny, interviewed by The Pillar on the Substack platform, stated that he had not heard during the consistory any complaints about the fact that the liturgy had not been discussed. No cardinal, according to his account, said, "I'm sorry we didn't talk about the liturgy." The observation is formulated casually, almost as if the absence of the topic were a marginal detail rather than a signal. The statement is striking not only for what it asserts, but for what it implicitly normalizes. At a time in history when the Mass in the Roman Rite continues to be the subject of restrictions, tensions, and questions, the fact that the College of Cardinals does not even feel the need to discuss it is presented as a neutral fact. Not a problem to be addressed, but a non-issue. Silence from this perspective is not a gap, it's a choice. When asked what Leo XIII intends to do about the Mass, Czerny responds with a formula that avoids any concrete position. The issue, he states, is beyond his level of decision. No hypothesis is ventured, no expectations are formulated, other than a generic call for peace. Every pope, from St. Peter onwards, would like to bring peace to the Church. A phrase that, while evocative, remains deliberately vague. The liturgy, once again, is pushed into the background, dissolved into abstract language. Overall, Czerny describes the consistory as a healthy exercise. The cardinals, he says, immediately got to work, dedicating the entire afternoon to discussion. All the sessions were judged positive. There was no friction, no tension, no unresolved issues. Even when the question of collegiality under Pope Francis was raised, Czerny rejected the idea that there were any shortcomings or difficulties. On the contrary, he argues that the consistory itself would not have been possible without Francis. Collegiality, therefore, not only would not have been lacking, but would have been the very condition of the meeting. The same approach emerges when the cardinal addresses the topic of synodality. A precise definition isn't provided, nor is its operational or doctrinal content clarified. If you see it, you don't understand it. Czerny states, you have to live it. Synodality is thus described as an experience rather than a principle, and according to the cardinal, the more synodal the Church is, the more it will evangelize. Here too, the language remains deliberately open, experiential, and free of clear boundaries. A few days later, on January 16th, a second intervention helped to further clarify the situation. Cardinal Spangler, Archbishop of Porto Alegre and President of the Episcopal Conferences of Brazil and Latin America, CELAM, gives an interview to Vida Nueva Digital. Here too the theme is the Mass in the Roman Rite, and here too the answer leaves no room for ambiguous interpretation. The river does not flow backward, says Spangler, a metaphor that, applied to the liturgy, clearly excludes any possibility of recovering the traditional form. This isn't simply a prudential or pastoral judgment, but a principled stance. What belongs to the past must not return. History, in his view, moves in only one direction. The Cardinal links this statement to a precise reading of the Second Vatican Council, described as an enormous effort to recover the fundamental elements of Catholic liturgical celebration. Proposals that look to tradition are defined as nostalgic and deemed not useful for promoting what the Council would have identified as essential. The traditional liturgy is not refuted on a doctrinal or ritual level, but delegitimized through a psychological category, nostalgia. In this way, the debate shifts from the level of truth to that of intention. There is no question of whether a liturgical form is legitimate, fruitful, or in conformity with the Church's tradition. Rather, it suggests that those who advocate it do so out of emotional attachment to the past. It's a rhetorical strategy that allows one to avoid direct confrontation, reducing the interlocutor to an internal state deemed unproductive. The positions expressed by Spangler do not appear to be isolated. On the contrary, they are presented as consistent with what emerged at the consistory, particularly with the theses supported by Cardinal Arthur Roche, already the subject of discussion for his interventions on the liturgical theme. The continuity between these voices suggests the existence of a consolidated line which crosses different levels of the ecclesiastical hierarchy. Spangler's definition of liturgy also aligns with Czerny's. Liturgy, he argues, cannot be understood simply as an expression of religious practice. Rather, it is a vigorous expression of a lived experience of faith, both personal and communal, an encounter with the person of Jesus Christ. A definition that privileges subjective experience over the objective dimension of the rite, and which tends to dissolve liturgical specificity into a broader and more indistinct category. Taken together, these statements paint a clear picture. On the one hand, the traditional liturgy is not discussed because it is not perceived as a real problem. On the other hand, when it is evoked, it is associated with categories such as nostalgia, the past, and immobility. In both cases, the result is the same: the neutralization of the theme. Not through explicit condemnation, but through omission and marginalization. Perhaps the most significant fact is precisely this: the liturgical question is not being addressed head-on, because for a significant portion of the ecclesiastical leadership, it has already been resolved. Not in the sense of a shared solution, but in the sense of an implicit decision. It's not a priority, it's not urgent, it doesn't deserve space in the collegial debate. Silence, thus, becomes a form of governance. In this context, the call for peace in the Church takes on an ambiguous meaning. The peace evoked comes not through the clarification of tensions, but through their removal. The aim is not to integrate different liturgical sensibilities, but to transcend them by marginalizing them. Synodality, understood as an experience, becomes the space in which dissent is absorbed without being named. What emerges is not an open conflict, but a silent fracture. A fracture that is undeclared, but manifests itself in the selection of themes, the language used, and the established priorities. The traditional liturgy, while continuing to exist in the concrete lives of many faithful, is progressively being excluded from decision-making. Not because it has been refuted, but because it is ignored. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment Amen. God bless you.